everyone. Welcome to the Let Go, Let God podcast. I have my friend Makayla here with me today, and I'm going to just say a quick prayer and then we'll get into it. Dear Heavenly Father, we love you so much and we invite you into this room with us. We thank you for everything that you've done. I thank you for bringing Makayla here in this room with us today so that she can share all the cool, amazing things that you've been doing in her life. I just pray that you place your hands on this conversation and just help us to talk about whatever it is you'd like today, Lord. And in your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so I'm going to start out by introducing you, Makayla. So me and Makayla met in a leadership class, and I think that was definitely the first time we ever met.
Yes.
Because we go to the same church, but that was the first time we met. We got put in the same cohort, and I just remember thinking, I was like, this girl is so impressive, and she's so young. I think she's the youngest guest we've had on the podcast. So I'm excited for you to share all the things that God's been doing in your life, because you're still in high school, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going into my junior year.
Oh my gosh, it's your junior year.
Yeah.
I thought it was your senior year. I thought maybe you were graduating. Yeah, even
well, I
younger.
might graduate early. I don't know because I'm homeschooled, so we'll see how that works. But yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
Very cool. What have you been up to this summer?
Obviously just trying to figure out what I want to do next year, if that's dual enrollment or anything for just DCU, and then figure out the future and everything, and then SAT prep and ACT prep, all that fun stuff everyone loves, and then just going on some trips with friends and everything like that. Oh. So yeah, it's been fun. Yeah,
soak it all in. I feel like for me, high school was ages ago, which it kind of was, but yeah, enjoy that. So you're in an exciting season of life for sure.
I am, yeah.
So we're gonna jump right in. I'm gonna ask you, what's one good thing that is happening in your life right now?
Right now, I feel called to help lead 5-6, and that's been really exciting for me because I've always felt like, especially in my friend groups or anything, I've kind of had like some sort of leadership role or just wanting to help and mentor other people. So it's kind of exciting that God is getting started on that and just growing me into the person He wants. And that's just been really exciting for me personally, and I think that's about it. That's just like the main thing that's going on.
Yeah, that's so exciting. So how did God kind of speak to you in telling you, oh, I want you to take on more of a leadership role? What did that look like for you?
Well, when Pillar was talking about the classes they had coming up and they mentioned the leadership one, my family was like, oh, that one sounds really hard. But then I was like, no, I actually think I need to do that. And I was just thinking back to all the times where people would defer to me on decision making or like, where should we go? And I was always the one planning events and stuff like that. And I was like, that might be something God's telling me to do. So I'm just going to do this class, and that might help me decide if that's something I really want to do. And I felt like I really thrived just learning leadership principles and all that stuff. And then it's becoming more clear to me over time that it's something that God really wants. And then I've just been exercising it more in my friend groups and trying to help people like see that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
just
definitely.
Lead people more, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really cool how you had this little nudge to do this leadership class, and with your parents being like, oh, it's a little bit, it looks like it's going to be a lot and kind of challenging, but you decided to take that one step and act out in faith, which led you to where you are now, which is so cool.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of the times when we think about all the successful things that we want to do, it can be kind of daunting because it's like, how are we going to get there? And you think, oh my gosh, there's so much work that needs to be done. But really, it's like when God calls you to do something, all you got to do is just take one step after the other.
Yeah.
And then you're good to go. So
what was nice is that He phased me into it with the class, and then kind of just slowly realizing that it was something I wanted to do, which was lead people maybe, and then kind of just segueing into it instead of like, there you go, you know what I mean? So it's been a nice transition period, and now I'm really excited to just step into it, for sure.
He's been prepping you for sure.
Yes.
Is it women and girls that are around your age, or is it younger, or is it older?
Younger, 5th and 6th graders.
Okay.
So
Cool.
It's really exciting.
Yeah. Have you faced any challenges in leadership so far since you've been doing it?
Oh, I haven't been doing it for long. I did kind of like a trial run on one of the Sundays, and then I just loved it so much that I'm going to continue to do that. There's going to be like a pool party and camp and all this fun stuff that I'm going to be part of. So it's like I really just felt at home when I kind of shadowed there, and just felt like I really belonged there, and that was really exciting just to see that.
Yeah.
I just fit in and everything.
Yeah, it's that piece that you're following that we were
yeah.
talking about right before we started recording.
Oh yeah,
so.
and then I'm probably gonna lead the girls' Bible study for high school too, which
Ooh.
is super exciting. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's so exciting. It's funny because I'm thinking about whenever I was your age, and I just there was no.
I think it went away.
If you need a sneeze, it's okay.
It went away. It's one of the ones that like comes up and then it's like, you know what I mean?
But I remember when I was your age, it's so funny that I'm doing this podcast right now because I would have never, like the word leadership in my vocabulary was just not, it was not me. It was not that person. But then as I got older, God revealed to me, oh, like maybe you should try this, maybe you should try this. And then I found, wow, this is really cool. I really like that. And so it's cool that you're already stepping into that because you're so young. And it's funny because I was in 1 Timothy a couple days ago. I think it was the morning that I texted you, which was last week or something like that. And I read the verse 1 Timothy 4:12 and I thought about you, and I think that it prompted me to text you, but I'm going to read the verse because then I'll go into what I was going to say. But it says, "Don't let anyone think less of you because you are young. Be an example to all believers in what you say, in the way you live, in your love, your faith, and your purity." And I had read that verse and I thought about you and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to, or actually, did you text me? Yeah, I think you texted me, but I thought about you when I read this and I was like, I wonder how she's doing. And so it's just funny, but
and then I texted you after you read that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But I just think that you're such a great example of this verse. And so that's why that's why you came to my mind. So.
Aww.
Yeah.
I love that verse so much.
Yes, it's so good. It's so good. So, guys, don't let anyone tell you that you're too young to do anything because, I mean, the world is evolving so much these days, and we need the younger generation to step up so that we can have some new, good, pure, thoughts and morals and all of that stuff out there. So, all right, let's segue into the question of the podcast. So, what is a life-changing lesson the Lord has taught you?
Mainly just how to really forgive others and just to let go of the mistakes they've made, even if it's against you. And that was something I had to let go of, especially segueing from my early childhood. It was really hard to forgive a situation where I felt like I wasn't being loved or valued before my adoption. And it was like, I always wondered, like, did they love me enough? Why wasn't I loved enough? And then just looking back on it, I just realized that they were human too, and they just made mistakes. And like forgiving them was the most freeing thing because I was letting it still hurt me years later for something they weren't necessarily trying to do. They just were in a bad situation and they were just trying to cope. And then I started to feel empathy for them, and it was really depriving from me when I wasn't forgiving them because it was like I would stop enjoying things in my life because I would be wondering about them. Like if it was my birthday or something like that, I would be like, oh, like I bet they don't even care. And I would just entertain those thoughts all the time to where I would just take the joy out of everything and hold a grudge, and it was just hurting me. And when I learned to let go of that, it was so freeing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's like a big weight lifted off your shoulder. What do you feel like was the turning point for you from, going from the resentment and the bitterness to, you know what, I need to just forgive and move on and realize that, like you said, it was their situation. It's not necessarily their fault, stuff like that. Like, what was it that kind of had that shift in your brain for you?
Yeah, have you heard the song Egypt? And then one of the verses is that that God is fighting for you, or just reading through Exodus and seeing how much God fought to just keep his people and everything. It was really inspiring because the biggest thing that made me hold a grudge was that my birth mom didn't show up to this court date where she could have kind of fought for custody and all this stuff, and she didn't really have much of an argument. But as like a 7-year-old, finding out that your birth mom didn't even want to come in to try to fight for custody, I was like, it really shifted me, and I was like, I guess I'm not worth fighting for, and I always resented her for that. But then when I realized how hard God was fighting for me in my life, it just made me realize that it didn't really matter how much really a broken person didn't do that for me because I just knew God was, and it just really replaced that, and just it was great.
That's really big. And you had written down, or you had given me the verse, which it's in Genesis. Genesis 50:20, you intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this portion so I could save the lives of many people, which is such a powerful verse.
It was that verse.
Yeah, it was that one? Okay,
It was so funny because have you ever just been reading and you're kind of zoning out? Because it's like, maybe it's a Bible story that like it doesn't keep you as engaged as maybe something else. And I was like, I was getting towards the end of it and I was kind of excited to just be done with Genesis. And then I was like, that was the last verse, and then it hit me, and it gave me just this energy, and it just gave me so much closure. And like, I didn't realize how big the grudge I was holding on, or how big the hurt I was holding on to, until I read that verse. And I was like, then I was really able to think of how much good came out of my life because of really the bad, because just seeing how I can love others, and just see that like I have more empathy for other people's situations, because I have been through a lot of circumstances that are hard, but they're all unique. So then if someone has like a situation they want to talk about, most of the time I can relate on some level, which is like it's really improved my friendships with other people, just being able to relate.
Yeah, that's so true. I think I've experienced that in different ways too, where I feel like I've gone through a bunch of different things, and it can be so frustrating, because it's like, okay, when is this gonna end? What's the next thing I'm gonna go through? And
you're anticipating it all the time.
Exactly, which you should not do. It's not a healthy way to live, but it's kind of natural. It comes natural. But I realized over a lot of the conversations I've had over the past year, I'm having coffee with someone, they're telling me their story, they're telling me something about their life, and I just had this insane amount of empathy for them, because I have experienced something similar. And in that moment, I'm actually filled with so much gratitude, because if not, I don't know how I would respond. And knowing that, I try to be aware of, putting myself in another person's shoes, because I'm not going to understand everything. You're not going to understand everybody's situation. Even if you have some of the same things that happen to you, it still is your situation and your story. And so I think another healthy thing to remember is no one is ever going to understand you completely except for God, because it's you and your story, and God understands and God knows, but you can't expect somebody to be like, oh, I totally feel exactly what you went through, because it's impossible.
Yeah,
for
sure.
But that's so beautiful that he was able to bring you out of that, because a lot of people just live their entire lives, not being able to forgive, holding grudges. I know there's been people I've held grudges on, and people that it's been harder for me to forgive because of certain things, and it's just robbing my life, just like you said. So it's definitely something that is a life-changing lesson, because now I'm sure, you're going to continue to go through life, and unfortunately people are probably going to do you wrong here and there, because that's just life. But knowing, you don't know everyone's situation, you can kind of move on to the next thing, because you know that God's fighting for you and he loves you unconditionally. So,
and at the end of the day, it's like it's starting to feel like the changing point for everything, to where it's like I could have the worst day, but then at the end of the day, just knowing that as a fact has always been like just so comforting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. And so I know that was just like because of that was an area of life that you got freedom in, and you had said you had always felt like you needed somebody in your life to love you because of this, and because when you were 7, you said?
Yes.
When you felt like your own mom didn't even want you, it's like, oh my gosh, what an imprint that would make on your life. Like, I can't imagine my relationship with my mom is amazing, and I can't imagine, like, at 7 years old, my mom telling me, like, or just with her actions showing me, like, that would crush me, And so feeling like you need to fill that void, but finally realizing God is enough is like so freeing, for sure.
Yeah. It definitely hurt when I couldn't, especially with like guys or whatever. I would just get into these meaningless relationships that I really didn't. I was putting in everything to try to get them to love me or show love, and then at the end, like, they would always end up like coming out of my life in some manner, and it just like I always thought it was a me problem, thinking that I was cursed or unlovable or something like that because I couldn't keep a person. So then I would just be on to the next person and like, how can I get this person to love me? And I would do that in friendships too. I would just give so much of myself to one person, hoping that they would stay. And then when they didn't, it would just like all over again.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's just crazy.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. What have you done now to kind of help combat that? Like if those feelings, I'm sure that it sounds like you've gotten a lot stronger now within them, but if they start to creep up again, like, oh, can I trust this person? Like how have you been healing to create new friendships and to open up your heart? What are the things that you do whenever those negative thoughts come back into your mind? Like, oh, they're gonna leave you, they're not gonna love you. What are those things that you do?
More recently, I haven't been struggling with it as much because I think my mom would always say, like, don't put all your eggs in one basket with, like, friends and stuff like that. And I was always like, that's such an old phrase and all that stuff. And I would just not believe it. But what I'm starting to realize is that when I have multiple friendships, and I don't put my all into it, but I'm having small connections with them. I'm letting them into small parts and we get to hang out and have fun. I get, like, the good parts of that person, you know, and it's, like, loving multiple people and receiving love from multiple people, but not totally just like surrendering everything to each person. And I do have a best friend, and he's like, he's so nice, and it just really helps. He helped me like trust people again because I didn't want to trust anybody, and it was very eye-opening to just not like instantly totally like pour everything into that, but over time just like little pieces of like, hey, like this was part of my past, but then we would get to have fun and laugh it off, and it wasn't like, it was very rewarding, and it helped me just trust people again.
And healing too. Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely. I think God is so sweet because it sounds like he put this person in your life to help with that healing process. And I think something that I always have to remember is God is the ultimate healer. He can heal anything and doesn't need to use any people or any medicine or anything like that. He can heal everything, but he does use people in our lives to help with the healing process. Like he can bring certain friendships into your life to help heal those wounds that you've had from past hurts and whatnot. And so it's really sweet that he brought that into your life. And so now it's like this person sounds like he's showing you like what earthly, like I guess what earthly love looks like, but from a spiritual standpoint, you know what I mean? So it's I guess it's spiritual love through the earthly body, which is super sweet, and that overpowers all. So very cool. So let's kind of go into, I had asked you what are some things that you do to kind of help balance all the things in your life. So I feel like I remember being in high school, and my memory's so bad. I don't remember a lot, but I just remember going to school. I think it was like I would go to school and hang out with my friends and then do sports, and then that was my life. So I didn't really feel like I had a ton to balance. But with you, whenever you have like this new ministry that you're working on, and then you have your friendships and your relationships, and then you have your classes and your family. So what do you do in order to kind of make sure everything is balanced and in alignment? Because I just remember being in high school and I would get so consumed with things at certain times. Like I would get so consumed with my sports, or so consumed with my boyfriend at the time, or so consumed with just whatever was going on, and I kind of was putting God on the back burner because I'm like, oh, all these things are happening. So what do you do in order to keep that balance?
Yeah, that honestly is a big struggle with me because I feel more important when I'm busy, which is definitely not true, because it doesn't matter how many things you do. It's not, it doesn't really mean much in the end, you know? But what I try to do is just recenter myself and be like, okay, why am I doing these things? Or before I do an event, I'm like, why would I be going to this event? Why would I hang out with this friends? What is it glorifying to God if I go into this situation? And that was like a more recent thing, because now that I am going to be more busy and stuff, it was kind of easier when my life was actually so chill, just being homeschooled, and like I had all the free time in the world, but now I don't, and things are going to get super busy, and I'm like trying to realign with God and be like, okay, like how am I going to be busy but still stay centered and calm through all of it? And that's something I haven't completely figured out yet, but I feel like at the end of a long day, like, it doesn't matter how tired I am, I just need to, like, sit and reflect on the day, maybe journal more. Journaling has been a big thing recently that just kind of helps me process everything.
Yeah.
And then rereading everything and just bringing it to God has been so essential, because it doesn't take much time. It could be 10 or 15 minutes of just focusing just on that, and it's given me so much peace no matter how much stressful or whatever my day was. It's just, I think that's a big thing for me.
Yeah. I think I've noticed that in my life too, because it's funny, there's sometimes where I wake up and I'm just instantly, my brain is in overdrive, because I'm like, I have all of these things to get done. I'm like, I have work, I have podcast stuff, I have these coffee dates that I need to go on, just like all these different things. And sometimes I think, oh, I don't have time to sit down and read my Bible or to journal and pray, which sounds, I mean, it's the truth. Like, that's what goes on in my brain sometimes. But I try to combat that, and I'm like, no, like, always make time. And it's funny because the days, this happened yesterday. Yesterday I had so many things to do, and I just remember thinking, I need to sit down and ask God for the strength to get through all the things I need to do today. And when I did that, I actually was able to, like, get everything done. I think I was done by like 5 p.m. where normally it would be maybe 9 or 10 p.m. And so I think it's just funny, because sometimes we think we're too busy to sit down with God, but that's when we actually need to sit down with God, because he's going to give us that strength to get through all the things that we need for the day. Yeah.
Well, another thing with the too busy thing, I definitely use that as an excuse, because I'm definitely the person who would get on Netflix and I could just sit there for hours, like 5 hours into the night, and I've just been watching movies or shows, and it's like, and then I go to bed and I'm like, oh, I didn't have time to read my Bible today, and I'm starting to realize, like, no, I had 5 hours to do something, but I was just sitting here, you know, and it's like, I'm just, like, not letting myself use the I don't have time excuse, or doing stuff with God before I plug in or something like that. It's been really helpful, or just looking at my screen time and being like, no, I had 2 hours of time to spend with God, but I was on this, you know, and it's like, just being more, like, time aware of how I'm using my schedule and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. And I think you said earlier, when I had asked you the question, you were like, it's kind of a battle. And I think it's an ongoing challenge, because you go through different seasons of life. So, you know, after you graduate high school, if you decide to go to college, that's a whole new monster, like a whole new monster of a schedule. And then, you know, one day you'll get married, and it's like, okay, now I have to balance the schedule with having a significant other in my life, and then kids. And then it's just, you know, your time slowly, I feel like it starts to minimize. And so I think it's remembering God gives us so much grace. So when we don't sit down with him, you know, he's not punishing us, he loves us. And sometimes I can get in my head too, like, oh my gosh, I feel guilty because I didn't do this today. But I have to remember, God loves just any time we spend with him, even if it's I'm driving somewhere and I'm just like, God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for all the things. And I always try to make it an intentional thing to spend that time with him, because that's where I've seen the most growth, and I want to. But yeah, I think it's an ongoing thing for sure.
The biggest thing for me was, I kind of got the picture a while ago, because I kept guilting myself for not spending time with God, and I was so mad that I didn't, you know, because I was like, I didn't do it today, and then the next day would go by because I was just so mad that I didn't, you know, because like, and then it just kept going, because I felt guilty going to God, having like not spent time with him for like a couple weeks and stuff like that. But just like the phrase came into my head, like, God doesn't have a stopwatch, you know. And I just got the picture of a PE coach, and like they would always have the kids run the laps. I was always so slow because I had some sort of asthma as a kid, like exercising through, so I'd be one of the slowest kids, and then like every time they looked at the stopwatch, they genuinely looked kind of disappointed in me, and I was like, God's not that PE coach. He's a loving God, and when I come to him, it's not like he looks down at some like holy stopwatch and is like, wow, like that was a lot of time or something like that. He's not like that, and that was a picture I needed to get out of my head. But now that I did, it's like, it was so freeing just knowing how loving God is, and he's not keeping track of when I'm not spending time with him, you know. He understands.
That's such a good picture. I love that. I'm gonna be thinking about that next time. And I thought about that actually in my quiet time this morning, and I felt like a couple months ago, back in November, we're in almost July now, which is wild. But back in November, I had some prophetic prayer done over me, and something that stuck with me was the guy said, Erika, God doesn't have you on a time clock. So whenever you think like you're falling behind or you're being rushed, like God is not rushing what he's doing in you. Like God constantly reminds me you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now in this season of life. And so it's just like, okay, let me let that soak in. And I've had multiple conversations with people literally just within the past 48 hours about just, you know, if we don't spend time with God, like feeling guilty. And I shared this with a couple of my friends, but I remember for the longest time I just felt God would punish me or was punishing me for not doing the right thing or for not spending enough time with him. And I specifically remember I was sitting in therapy one day years ago, and I remember like just tears in my eyes, and I was like, I think God is punishing me for all the things that I've done, and that's why this isn't happening, or that's why this isn't happening. And then she just looked at me and she's like, Erika, that is such a lie. You need to get that out of your brain. And I think about the story of Job when all of his family and friends were like, you must be sinning, you must be doing something wrong with all these terrible things happening to you. But he wasn't doing anything wrong. And there are times where we need to check and make sure, you know, we're living good, godly life. But I think it's just remembering God's grace and his love. And so, it's so good.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I kind of want to switch gears again a little bit and kind of talk about another part of your testimony. And so I know you mentioned that you were adopted. So were you adopted at age 7, like after all that court, around age 7?
I'm pretty sure it was 7. It could have been 8, but I'm pretty sure it was 7. So I'm going to stick with that because I think it was 7.
Yeah. Before the age of 7, do you remember a lot of your lifestyle? Because I know there's something that we'll bring up here, but do you remember a lot, or do you feel like it was a blur?
It was a blur, and she wasn't a horrible person. I mean, she made the wrong choices, but in moments where things weren't bad or she wasn't probably on something, I don't know what she was taking, but I know she smoked and all that stuff. So it was like moments where she wasn't doing stuff she probably shouldn't have been doing. She was actually a very loving person, and I could tell she did love me. There was like a few videos we have of just when I was a kid where she would say like, I love you and all this stuff, and like she was genuinely trying her best. She was in a really bad situation, and I do have empathy for her, but as far as just moments where things weren't good, I know she was abusive and stuff like that. And what was kind of the saving grace was that we lived in a trailer home with my grandpa, who also wasn't really the nicest person, but he was like a good guy. And we had a German Shepherd, and she would protect me with her life, which was like, looking back on it, I really felt like God was like using that to just keep me safe in any regard that he could. Because like anytime she would yell at me, or just like she would be abusive, like she would try to hit me and stuff like that, but that like she would stand in front of me. And it's a German Shepherd, like, you know, like
those things,
it's scary. And she would stay in my room, or if like it's a weird situation, but like I never felt more safe when she had like a cat stay with us, like my aunt's cat or something stayed with us, and this cat like tried to scratch me or something. It was just being like really mean to me, and I was like a toddler or something, and then like she jumped in front of me and like was trying to attack the cat, probably with the intention to kill it. And it was like, it was just like that dog would always try to keep me safe. So it was like, it really helped me in my childhood. But besides that, I was exposed to pornography and just violent behaviors and her abusive relationships. And I know I also had a babysitter who was in the same situation. So she also had a very toxic relationship that was revolved around sex and stuff like that. And if she said no, her boyfriend would be very abusive. So any relationship I saw looked like that. So I really just thought that was normal. Yeah. And I was like, oh, if you say no to a guy, that's what it's going to look like. Like, I better not do that. And it didn't like, it wasn't like a cognitive thought. I don't know if that's the right word, but like, I think it just kind of was imprinted in the back of my mind that was wrong to say no to any guy who like, you know, and that was just like a big part of my childhood. And my birth dad wasn't present, and just like all that felt normal, you know?
Yeah, that's all you knew. That's all you knew. That's all you knew on this earth, all you were exposed to. So why would you think that there was any other way? You know, I'm trying to put myself in that situation, and I think back to this a lot where, you know, as I get older, I realized that I have to protect my brain, my brain and my ears from certain things, because I know that I don't want to feed myself those things, because it's not going to be healthy for me. I want to produce the good fruits, and I don't want to have that clouding my judgment. And I always think, when you're little and your mom's like, or your mom or dad, they're like, don't watch that, they're trying to protect you. They're like, oh no, you can't be out past a certain time. And never more in my life than now, at the age of 25, am I like understanding why they did that.
Yeah.
And before, it just feels like they're restricting you. They're giving you all these rules. Yeah. But now I'm realizing, wow, they were just protecting me.
It does have a big impact on you.
Huge, yeah.
Went through a season where I only listened to NF, who's like, you heard his music, he raps in a very like aggressive way, and it's very angry, and it was in middle school, and I was never happy. I would wear like black, and I would just be so mad at everyone, and I couldn't fathom why. I couldn't put into words why, and my mom was like, finally, she was like, it's the music you're listening to, and I was like, you're wrong and all this stuff. But then I stopped listening to it for a week, and I was so much happier.
Wow.
And then last night I was just listening to Disney music because I was in such a good mood, and then it just boosted my mood so much. My mom's like, why are you so happy? I'm like, I'm listening to It's Summer from the Frozen track, like how could you not be happy?
Yeah.
Like Hakuna Matata. But it definitely does have such a big impact on you, and it's like what you feed yourself like comes out, or like what comes in comes out kind of thing. And it's like I've had to realize that for myself, like those shows I'm watching and the music I'm listening to really does have an impact on how I treat others and how I'm thinking. And that's like that makes me look back to my childhood and just seeing like all that stuff, how it rewired my brain, and then I had to like do the process of undoing that. And that was rewiring. Like, it took a while, but it's like I'm getting there, which is really good.
Yeah, so, absolutely, for sure. That's a lot to be exposed to at that age, and then kind of figuring out what to do next. I also know you had mentioned this, and I want to bring it up just in case anybody else has ever like experienced this or something like that. But I know you said you had been exposed to pornography at a young age, and you kind of thought, oh, this is normal, like this is what I see on the TV. I'm assuming you kind of had this probably feeling in your heart or your gut that, what is this? Like, this probably isn't right. And then you had mentioned you went to, was it like a youth camp?
Yes.
Or,
so that's kind of how it shifted, and I was like, that's normal, because that TV was also used to play my kids shows like Barney and Sesame Street, and then pornography. And when it felt really different, but when it was mixed in like that, it kind of just became very normal to me. And I was like, well, this is like 5 minutes ago I was watching Barney, and now it's this, so like I guess that's just kind of normal.
Yeah.
And
oh my gosh, it's polar opposites.
Exactly. But sorry, what was the question? I sidetracked.
I was just gonna kind of get to where you were at your youth thing.
Yeah. And that did affect my life, because when I started talking to guys and stuff like that, that's also agenda they were pushing. And then I was like, well, because it was normal in my childhood, that's normal now. And when I realized it was wrong was at a youth camp where the pastor, he was talking about all the sins that we struggle with, and I was really reached by that sermon and convicted to talk about just sexual sin and how it's affected me through all my life. And the room was so vulnerable, and like people were, as we were going through the sins, like anger and just other things that people were struggling with, everyone was being so open. And then they were like, okay, like we're gonna talk about sexual sin, but the way she opened it was like, but because you guys, like, I'm guessing none of you guys really struggle with this, that's kind of like a guy thing, especially pornography, so like if you guys want to talk about it, that's cool. And then the room just went dead silent, and this like the vibe of just vulnerability and safety was totally killed. And I went into the room so excited to talk about that, not excited, but like so ready to just get it off my plate. And I was like, well, now I really don't feel like I can. I'm not safe, and obviously no one else is struggling with this. And that really, it was awful for me to just have to let that go. And I was like, I just sank back into that sin, and I felt even more weighed down because I was like, no one's gonna understand. So then I went home, and then I was like, I'm gonna try to combat this on my own. But then when like something happened in September, I was presented with like actually doing something with a guy, and I was like, well, like I just did because without much thought of it. And after that, it just completely ruined me. And I always wonder, like, what if she started that conversation differently and I was actually able to get the help I needed from like my community and all that stuff, and maybe other people were in the same situation or something similar, and like what if they didn't get the help they needed because of just how that was presented. And that's something I want to bring into my leadership style. And obviously I'm not going to like go up to a 5th grader and like ask that question, but I want to cultivate environments where people can talk about anything they need to, and I want to support them in that. And I don't like, sins are not gender specific. Everyone has them, and I don't want to be a person who invalidates anybody.
That's
like
for anything.
Exactly.
Because there's so many things that we can feel so shameful of or embarrassed, and it's already hard enough to talk about them. And so when you're not in that safe space, and as I was saying before we started recording too, you know, you thought you were in the safe space with someone, you know, a leader in your life, and then it's like, oh, it just must have been so confusing. But I love how God still gave you that. He gave you that feeling of, oh, you know, like, remember, like, this is wrong. This is not right. So although you were probably confused because of what was said to you, God still put that like deep down in you, and you listened to that. And so did you combat, how did you kind of go about like getting the help that you needed? Were you ever able to talk about it with anybody, or?
No, my mom and dad just had to find out the hard way. So they actually saw my Amazon history, and it wasn't going to come in time, so I canceled the order, but I was going to get like a contraceptive pill because I didn't know if I was going to end up pregnant from the situation I was in. And that was like, they found out obviously that happened, because why else would I be ordering that? And then they, like, everything shut down in my life. We were like, okay, like, I don't think we should go to that school anymore. And that's when I was homeschooled, and then I was completely like alone. But my mom, she was a big part of helping me heal, because she wasn't condemning me every day or anything like that. She was trying to help me get out of it and build the confidence. She got me a journal, and like all she did was like love me through that season, and that was all I needed the whole time without like realizing it. So she was like a big part of just helping me, you know?
That's good. I'm glad that she was able to be there for you, and now you have this awareness of and this empathy to be able to help other people in that situation. Because I mean, I've just thought about that too, where I'm like, man, if I had people like women that I have in my life now that were pouring into me when I was 15 or 16, oh man, I mean, it would have been life-changing for sure. Which is
and I felt like I guess I couldn't get out of the situation in a way. Like, that's what I felt, because especially if I couldn't reach out to someone because I felt like I wasn't allowed to or was too taboo, then I just felt stuck. So I didn't end up doing that, but like it would have helped so much. And that's my goal in life now, is just to try to help people do that. But I think I had a point to that, but I don't know what it is.
That's
anymore,
okay.
so,
I know I had a point too. I'm gone.
Fine,
But no. So like, I think just touching on that, I just wanted to say to anybody listening, this is why it's so important to talk to God and discern things with Him, because sometimes like people in your life will say things, and I've kind of touched on this before on the podcast, but we're all human. We make mistakes, you know, we're not perfect. Like, I know I've said some things that I'm like, probably shouldn't have said it like that, but it just is the way that it is. And who knows, maybe that person realized that later down the road and was like, man, I shouldn't have done that. But maybe they never knew because no one ever said anything to them. But make sure you talk to God, trust your discernment, and it is very important to find those safe people that you can confide in with whatever it is that you need. And those people are out there, so just, if you don't know where to find them, just ask God to kind of show you, and He will reveal that to you. So, man, that's lots of good stuff that we unpacked. Do you have anything else, like any lasting things that you want to say? Okay.
This is the last part, but I think meeting my best friend back in February really helped too, because he just showed me that love wasn't just physical, and like he saw my personality and just who I really was, and that's what he focused on, and like really got to know me on a personal level, and like just I could trust him and all that stuff, and that was a turning point too, and that was the safe person that I found, and a safe person God brought into my life at the right time, and it was like, that was huge too. So it's like, it's just such a blessing when you find out that, I mean, everyone is human, but some people are sometimes like a little nicer, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And I truly believe, ask and you shall receive. Like God will give you exactly what you need to help you in your situation if you just ask for it. And so many good things to unpack. I loved that. I think that this conversation is going to be very impactful to the people listening. And so please feel free to reach out if you guys need any help with resources, or you just don't know where to start with anything. Like, we're here for you. Like, that's what we're both put on this earth for, and a lot of other people, like, we want to help. So thank you so much, Makayla, for coming on, and I'm excited to hear more about your journey and see what God's going to be doing.
Thank you.
So, all right. Okay, guys, we'll see you next time. Bye.